Across India, populations are rapidly shifting. Millions are migrating, urban centers are swelling, and regional birth rates are diverging sharply. Yet despite this massive demographic movement, the physical map of India's political representation remains completely static. The total number of parliamentary seats and their state-wise allocation have been locked into place. This stasis is entirely intentional. Through successive acts of parliament, the country has deliberately frozen its representational map until the year 2026. To see why the world's largest democracy chose to pause a core democratic function, we have to look at the constitutional machinery that draws the borders, the growing demographic divide between the North and the South, and the specific amendments that put the system on ice. Operating on outdated representational ratios means a single member of parliament in one state might represent millions more citizens than an MP in another, severing the proportional link between the electorate and the government. The mechanism designed to prevent this imbalance is called delimitation, the constitutionally mandated process of redrawing territorial constituency boundaries. The primary goal of delimitation is to enforce a strict mathematical baseline for democracy: one vote, one value. Looking at this diagram, we can see how the mechanics are supposed to work. As populations grow or migrate over time, district borders must be repeatedly readjusted so that every elected official answers to roughly the same number of people. If you remove this mechanism, equal representation collapses. Regions that experience rapid population booms become severely underrepresented in the legislature, diluting the value of every individual vote cast there. Delimitation is the routine, mathematical heartbeat required to keep a republic proportional. Recognizing this necessity, the framers drafted Article 82 of the Constitution, explicitly mandating that a reallocation of seats must occur after every census. The enormous task of mapping these new boundaries is handed to a highly specialized, independent body, the Delimitation Commission. To ensure strict legal and structural integrity, the commission is led by a retired Supreme Court judge. The chairperson is joined by two specific officials: the Chief Election Commissioner of India and the respective State Election Commissioner, and these three individuals are appointed directly by the President of India. Once formed, this three-member panel wields absolute authority over the electoral map. Their decisions operate under the principle of non-justiciability. This means their final boundary orders cannot be challenged, delayed, or reviewed in any court of law. They are also entirely immune from legislative veto. Neither the Parliament in New Delhi nor any state assembly has the power to modify a single line drawn by the Commission. By design, the Constitution engineered the Delimitation Commission to be an untouchable mathematical entity, thoroughly insulated from the pressures of political tampering. The theory of delimitation is elegantly simple, but this map of India reveals the problem. We have to apply those rigid rules to two entirely different demographic realities, split heavily between the northern and southern states. Over the last several decades, southern states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu successfully implemented strict state-sponsored family planning policies, achieving stabilized population curves. During that exact same period, northern states like Uttar Pradesh and Bihar experienced compounding exponential population growth. This creates a direct structural conflict between effective national population control and proportional seat allocation. If the Delimitation Commission strictly applies the math, the outcome is severe. Parliamentary seats physically migrate away from the South, stacking heavily onto the booming northern states. By rigidly enforcing one vote, one value, the Constitution inherently rewards runaway demographic expansion with greater political dominance in the Lok Sabha. At the exact same time, it punishes the states that successfully followed the central government's directives on family planning by stripping away their legislative representation. India faced an impossible choice. It had to either maintain perfectly equal voter weight across the board or actively incentivize the population control policies required to keep the nation economically viable. This timeline shows how the government initially handled the process. Delimitation was executed successfully 4 times in 1952, 1963, 1971, and 2002. But by the mid-1970s, the widening demographic gap meant the representational penalty about to hit the southern states could no longer be ignored. The government intervened with the 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act of 1976. This act suspended the reallocation of seats. The rationale was to freeze the political map entirely, giving all states a window to focus heavily on population control without the immediate threat of losing power in Parliament. Decades later, with growth rates still uneven, Parliament intervened again. The 84th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 extended the freeze all the way to 2026. Legislators offered a dual rationale for this extension. First, they explicitly stated their commitment to rewarding the states that had successfully stabilized their demographics, refusing to penalize them for their efficiency. Second, there were sheer physical limits to consider. Continuously adding infrastructure and physical seats to Parliament to keep pace with a booming demographic curve was logistically unsustainable. The legislative branch chose not to solve the core paradox. Instead, they built a temporal dam, holding back the immense pressure of demographic reality until the year 2026. A freeze of this magnitude matters because altering the boundaries of a single constituency creates a systemic ripple effect across the entire constitutional structure. Looking at this flowchart, the primary effect of delimitation is dictated by Article 81, changing the total composition of the Lok Sabha. But that exact same boundary drawing process is mandated by Article 170 to dictate the composition of the state legislative assemblies. This brings us to Article 55, the provision that outlines the complex mathematics of the Presidential Electoral College. The Electoral College is composed entirely of those elected members of Parliament and members of legislative assemblies. Redrawing local maps shifts the balance of state power, which in turn alters the strict mathematical formula determining who chooses the President of India. The impending 2026 deadline is an administrative reckoning. It marks the breaking of a 50-year-old dam, artificially holding back decades of massive, unequal population growth. When the freeze is finally lifted, the math will have to be reconciled, forcing an unavoidable recalibration of India's entire constitutional balance of power.